No power lines, no gas pipes, no oil deliveries. Deep in the Appalachian Mountains, winter meant 6 months of brutal cold that could kill a family in their sleep. The temperature dropped to 20 below zero. Snow piled 8 feet deep against cabin walls. Ice storms knocked down trees and blocked mountain passes for weeks. They needed heating systems that worked when everything else failed. They needed techniques that could keep a family warm using nothing but what the mountains provided. They needed knowledge that meant the difference between waking up alive or freezing to death in their beds. Every method mattered. One failed heating system, one poorly built chimney, one night without adequate warmth, and an entire family could be found frozen solid when spring arrived. The mountain people who survived generations of Appalachian winters had perfected heating techniques that were more sophisticated than most modern systems. Methods that used the natural resources of the mountains with incredible efficiency. But how did Appalachian families create heating systems that could warm entire cabins using only wood and stone? Which forgotten techniques allowed them to maintain comfortable temperatures through the harshest mountain winters? And how did they build heating systems that were safer and more efficient than many modern alternatives? Today, we're exploring the ingenious heating methods that kept Appalachian families alive in the mountains, where winter was a 6-month battle for survival. My name is Sam, and this is Wild America. Between 1750 and 1900, Appalachian families developed heating systems that were marvels of practical engineering. These weren't the simple fireplaces found in modern cabins. These were sophisticated thermal management systems that could heat entire homes using minimal fuel while providing safety, efficiency, and comfort that modern heating often can't match. The foundation of mountain heating: stone masonry and thermal mass. When the first settlers came into this wilderness trying to hack it out of all these dense trees, they knew winter was coming. So they worked hard. The whole family did, trying to get a roof over their heads and figure out how to stay warm. This is how man has been staying warm since the beginning of time itself. Fire makes heat, heat keeps you warm. But these old mountain folks took it way beyond just building a fire. They understood that different stones held heat different ways. They'd go down to the creek and spend weeks gathering just the right stones. Sandstone provided steady, long-lasting heat. Limestone heated quickly, but cooled fast. River rocks could explode when heated too rapidly, while mountain granite provided the most reliable thermal mass. The construction process began with site selection that maximized heating efficiency. These mountain builders positioned their chimneys on the north wall to create a thermal barrier against cold mountain winds. They angled the chimney base to capture and reflect heat back into the cabin, creating a radiant heating system that warmed the entire structure. The mortar system was equally sophisticated. Mountain people created clay-based mortars using local materials that could withstand extreme temperature changes without cracking. They mixed clay with sand, ash, and sometimes animal hair to create joints that remained flexible through freeze-thaw cycles while maintaining structural integrity. The firebox design was the heart of the system. These weren't just holes in the wall. They were angled just right to throw heat back into the cabin. The back wall was angled to reflect heat forward. The sides were splayed to increase radiation, and the throat was sized to create optimal draft without losing heat up the chimney. The secret wasn't just building a fire. It was building a system that captured every bit of heat and held it like a warm embrace through the coldest nights. Mountain craftsman Jeremiah Collins, 1887. This masonry system created heating that was both efficient and safe. The thermal mass prevented dangerous temperature spikes while providing steady, comfortable heat. The stone construction eliminated fire hazards while creating heating systems that could last for generations with minimal maintenance. The science of mountain wood: fuel selection and preparation. Now, cutting firewood nowadays, you got these chainsaws that make it easier, but it's still a lot of work. But back then, they didn't have no chainsaws. They done most of it by hand with a crosscut saw, and that's a lot of physical labor. But here's what they really understood. not all wood burns the same. Appalachian people developed an incredibly sophisticated understanding of wood properties that allowed them to maximize heat output while minimizing fuel consumption. The hardwood hierarchy was fundamental knowledge. Oak provided the longest burn times and highest heat output, making it ideal for overnight fires and extended heating. Hickory burned even hotter but faster, perfect for quick heating and cooking. Maple provided steady, moderate heat that was ideal for maintaining consistent temperatures. The seasoning process was equally critical. Mountain people understood that green wood contained up to 50% water that had to be evaporated before combustion could occur, wasting enormous amounts of heat energy. They'd cut and split their wood months ahead, stacking it just right so air could flow through and dry it proper. The cutting and splitting methods maximized surface area for efficient burning. They knew exactly how to split different wood species to create pieces that would ignite quickly, burn completely, and provide maximum heat output. They understood grain patterns, wood density, and splitting techniques that optimized each piece of fuel. I've seen my grandma many times split wood when I was little, and let me tell you, it wasn't about being big and strong. It was technique. Many women in these mountains could split wood as good as any man. Even kids learned how to do it right. They didn't just do this in wintertime either. They prepared all year long because they knew winter was coming, and when it hit, you better be ready. The burning techniques maximized heat output from each piece of wood. Mountain families knew how to arrange wood in the firebox for optimal combustion, how to control airflow for complete burning, and how to time fuel additions for continuous heat without waste. For more details on traditional frontier construction methods, check out our comprehensive guide, How Mountain Men Built Cabins from Scratch. 1.5-hour compilation. Heat distribution and circulation systems. Now these old cabins, they weren't insulated like houses today. Had a lot of cracks, a lot of leaks, and they'd get cold real easy. I've walked up on old abandoned houses where people had covered their walls with newspapers for insulation. You could sit there and read history on those walls, papers from the teens, the 20s, even World War II headlines, but the smart ones figured out how to move that heat around. The natural convection system was the foundation of Appalachian heat distribution. Mountain builders understood how warm air rises and cold air sinks, and they designed their cabins to take advantage of these natural air currents. The baffle system directed airflow for maximum heating efficiency. They'd use wooden baffles, hanging blankets, and strategic furniture placement that channeled warm air to living areas while preventing heat loss through doors, windows, and other openings. The thermal chimney effect created continuous air circulation. Mountain people designed their cabins with specific ceiling heights, room layouts, and opening placements that created natural air movement that distributed heat evenly throughout the structure. And those stone hearths? They weren't just for looks. The floor heating system utilized the thermal mass principle at ground level. That stone would soak up heat all day and give it back at night. They also used heated stones that could be moved to different areas for localized warming. The whole family usually gathered around these old fireplaces. It was the center point of the house. The family was everything, and that fireplace brought them together. The bed warming system ensured comfortable sleeping temperatures even when cabin temperatures dropped. Some folks would heat up stones by the fire and carry them to their beds to stay warm through the night. Wood stoves and coal, the evolution of mountain heating. Later on, when they started coal mining in these mountains, people discovered this black coal that burned hotter than anything they'd ever seen. They started out with little cook stoves, wood stoves for cooking their meals in these cabins. All different types of little stoves, big stoves, little stoves, all kinds of wood stoves. And they used coal too. These winters were harsh and they kept these stoves going 24/7 most of the time to keep the house warm at night. I can remember my grandma's house had an old warm morning stove. You put a piece of that block coal in there, that thing would turn cherry red. You had to be careful though. Some of them old stoves just couldn't handle that much heat. You couldn't put a big block of coal in, it would melt it down. People would go around selling and delivering coal, just like they did with wood. These old mining camps, the guys worked in the mines, but they had to buy the coal most of the time, and they could barely afford it with a big old family. So they just scraped by, making a living in these old mountains. A lot of them would go down to an old seam sticking out next to a creek or holler somewhere and mine it themselves. It was a lot of work keeping up with coal. It was nasty too. I witnessed people picking coal up off the railroad tracks where the trains went by, loaded with coal, and pieces would roll off the top. Even the old one-room schoolhouses had pot-belly stoves burning coal. Somebody had to come in early every morning to build the fire before the kids arrived. To explore more about frontier heating and survival methods, watch our episode on How Frontiersmen Survived the Frozen Wilderness, 2-hour winter documentary. Safety and maintenance, staying alive through winter. Now, keeping these heating systems safe wasn't just about comfort, it was about staying alive. A chimney fire or carbon monoxide poisoning could kill a whole family, and help was days away in these mountains. The fire prevention system was the most critical aspect of Appalachian heating safety. Mountain families understood that cabin fires were almost always fatal because of isolation, limited water sources, and the speed at which wooden structures burned. They had to clean those chimneys regularly, weekly inspections and cleaning during heating season. Mountain families knew how to recognize dangerous creosote buildup, how to clean chimneys safely, and how to identify structural problems that could cause fires or carbon monoxide poisoning. The spark arrestor system prevented flying embers from igniting cabin roofs or surrounding forest. Mountain people created chimney caps, screens, and deflectors that contained sparks while maintaining proper draft for efficient combustion. They knew exactly how far to keep furniture and clothes from the fireplace. The clearance protocols ensured that combustible materials were kept at safe distances from heating sources while maintaining functional living space, and they always made sure there was enough air coming in for the fire to breathe right. The ventilation system prevented carbon monoxide poisoning that could kill families in their sleep. Mountain people understood how to maintain proper airflow that provided oxygen for combustion while removing dangerous gases from living areas. The old-timers had emergency plans too. They kept backup heating methods and knew what to do if their main system failed. Because in these mountains, one cold night without heat could be your last. Insulation and weatherproofing, keeping the cold out. Keep in mind, these little houses back 100 years ago, people living back in the country, these hollers, these mountains, they weren't well insulated. Nothing insulated at all. Had a lot of cracks, a lot of leaks, and they'd get cold real easy. You can see that a lot of people would cover their walls inside the house with newspapers because there wasn't no insulation in them days. They would use newspaper for insulation to keep the cold air out of the cracks and prevent air from coming in and out of the house and losing the warm air. It would amaze me just to look at them. It was like history on the walls. You could sit and read. I've seen them back to the turn of the century, in the teens, the 20s, 30s, even some World War II papers. I remember seeing Pearl Harbor headlines on some of them. You can't tell me these old people in these hollers didn't live hard. This was before modern conveniences, before insulation, before anything like that. So keep that in mind when you think of these old houses. They had a hard time keeping warm. A lot of them would just close off most of the house when it got real bad in winter to save wood. They'd all sleep in certain rooms and let the rest of the house just stay cold. The heat conservation techniques were essential for survival when fuel was limited and temperatures dropped below zero for weeks at a time. The fuel economy, how much wood? It really took. It takes a lot of wood for wintertime. You could see that pile of wood right there. They would be lucky to get a little one-room cabin through the winter. It takes a lot of wood when you're stoking that up hour after hour, day after day. It adds up. For just a regular little furnace or stove, you could use 10 to 20 cords of wood in a winter. That's just for a little over 2,000 square foot house. Now these old houses with multiple chimneys, that's at least 4 fireplaces, maybe 6 fireplaces in the big farmhouses. You could take a pile of wood and multiply it times 10, and you might be close to heating one of those old houses. It takes a lot of wood. Most of these old fields you see out in these valleys and hollers were cleared for pasture, but they were full of forest, so they cut them down and used the wood to build houses, barns, all kinds of stuff. That's where this wood came from. The wood storage system protected seasoned wood from moisture while allowing air circulation that prevented rot and insect damage.